Good afternoon. Wow, first of all, I'm so inspired. I've only been here for 1 hour, but I was just listening earlier thinking I wish I'd really come last night and heard the morning as well, because I don't know if you know, but around the world, people tend to think of Singaporeans as bankers and quite materialistic, in the same way they think of the British as shopkeepers, you know. But the truth is very, very far from that, and every time I come to Singapore, I'm always inspired by how so many people want to create this society of goodness and society of helping one another. You heard a bit about my story. I was born in England, and I was born to a poor family, single mom. Grew up poor, but of course being poor in England is very different to being poor in some of the countries surrounding Singapore. Even though we were poor, I got good education and healthcare. And at the age of 20, I was able to borrow some money from Prince Charles, believe it or not, through his foundation, the Prince's Trust. He lent me £2,500 to start a business in computer games. You know, what else? How do you get to be a multi-millionaire at the age of 25 unless it's through computer games? So my business became very successful very quickly. And I had all those things: Ferraris, Porsches, BMWs. I used to go to work by helicopter, everything you could possibly imagine. But I found myself one day in the Beverly Hills Hotel, and I was wondering why, even though I had everything I could possibly have dreamt of, life felt very empty. And I started to think about the difference between pleasure and happiness. And they're very different. Pleasure always has a price tag. You know, new clothes or a new car or whatever it is. But happiness comes from your relationships. And for me, knowing that you're fulfilling God's purpose with your life. And so in the Beverly Hills Hotel, I got down on my knees and I started to pray. And I prayed, Lord, why am I rich? And a lot of people are praying, Lord, why am I poor? But I thought, there must be a reason why you blessed me. It felt very unfair. I was not doing anything good, just computer games, and here I was with everything. And so I started to feel really very guilty about the whole thing. And I went around the world, spent 6 months going all over the world. I actually left my computer game company, and I was trying to find things to help. And after 6 months, I got very disappointed. I'd met a lot of people trying to help the poor around the world, but nobody could show me even one slum that they'd managed to transform. Everywhere I looked, the people were still poor. And so I kind of gave up and I went back to England. And then I met this Filipina there who was from the Philippines, and she was studying in England. And she told me she was feeling guilty because for the price of the plane ticket from Manila to London, she could have built 2 houses in the Philippines through this organization called GK. And I was thinking, wow, what kind of house is this? What's the same as a handbag? You know, who are these people living in handbags in the Philippines? I didn't know much about the Philippines. All I knew was Imelda Shoes and Abu Sayyaf, and that's all I knew. But I thought, well, I want to go and see this organization. So I went to have a look, and what I saw really blew my mind. I was visiting places that used to be slums that were now beautiful, peaceful communities, and it felt like these places would never be slums again. So I went back home. The first thing I saw when I got back to England was the brand new BMW that I just bought a few weeks before. And looking at my car, I really felt sick. I was looking at my car thinking, wow, this is worth about 80 houses in the Philippines. And I started to walk around it, kicking the wheel, thinking, that's 2 houses, just a wheel. And I didn't want to think about it for very long, so I emailed the head of this organization, a guy called Tony Melotto, and I said, I've decided I want to help. You didn't ask me for any money, but I'm going to sell the car. Please build a village, and if you could please call it the GK BMW Village. And his answer changed my life. He said, you know, if you want to help, please don't just send your money. Why don't you come back? And that was the first time anyone had said that to me. You know, mostly when you offer people money, they just say thank you, and then that's the end of it. But his answer changed my life. I went back. I was supposed to stay for 6 weeks. I fell in love with GK, fell in love with the Philippines, and then I fell in love with his daughter. So that was 15 years ago, and I'm still there. And you know, I can honestly say life has really changed. All those things have gone. All the cars have gone. The helicopter's gone, you know. But I've never been happier in my life. And I just want to show you a couple of pictures if I can. We can bring up some of the slides. This is where I live. This is the public face of the Philippines. Next, please. Oh, do I have a clicker? Sorry. There we go. But of course, this is the reality in the Philippines. A lot of places look like this, and tens of millions of Filipinos live like this. But this is what we do with it. And we've been able to build now 80,000 houses, 400,000 people living in communities like this. This is the village where my BMW went. This is how it looked before, and this is what we were able to turn it into. So 63 houses in one school. They wouldn't let me call it the BMW village, so they called it the Leeds village, which is where I was living in England at that time. And so here are some of the others. So, you know, this is very difficult to explain. When you just donate money to a cause, what you feel is the pain of parting with your money. But when you're able to see the results, and especially when you're able to meet the people that were helped, what you feel is the joy of giving. And that's what the video earlier on was showing, right? And I think more and more that's what we have to try and involve people in, not just go for fundraising, not just go for the money. If Tony Milotto had just said thank you to me, my life would not have changed. And I would have probably still been wondering, you know, what's life about? And just sitting here on this beach, surrounded by luxury, and I feel empty. You know, but because someone involved me, someone didn't just take my money, but they actually wanted me to be there. In the end, he got all my money, but I got his daughter. And so, we also work with kids. Some of these kids, one of the first schools we built, I was asking the kids in that school, these were kids of garbage scavengers. They just survived by going through garbage, looking for things to sell, and looking for food that they could reheat. And we built a school in one of these areas, and it was very difficult to get the parents to put their kids there, because they were saying, our kids will be scavengers like us. They don't need a school, we can teach them how to do that. They had no dreams for their kids beyond what they were doing. They thought their kids could never be anything else. So eventually we got the kids in there by providing them with free food. You know, that's how we managed to get the parents to put them in. And I was asking the first batch of kids one day, what do you want to do when you grow up? Nobody had an answer. You know, they thought it was a strange question. And eventually, after a bit of prodding, one girl said, I want to be a japayuki. A japayuki is basically a prostitute. And that was the only person in her community who she knew of that was doing a bit better. Of course, 6 years old, she didn't know what that was, but that was the person she looked up to. After those kids had been in that school a few months, I was back in that village and asking them the same question. Now all the hands were going up. And what do you want to do when you grow up? One boy wanted to be a teacher, another wanted to be an engineer, you know, another wanted to be a nurse. I don't think I even knew what an engineer was when I was 6 years old. And so these kids will not grow into the next generation of scavengers and prostitutes and, you know, drug dealers, but they will actually grow into those things. And just because we help them to dream. Livelihood, of course, very important. So Philippines is always being hit by typhoons. This is a town, the whole town was destroyed by this huge typhoon. There was a lot of illegal logging. When the typhoon hit, the logs came crashing down through the mountains and flattened every single building in the town except one. And so the people were burning the logs to make charcoal and selling the charcoal. And they were earning 50 pesos, which is about $1 for a huge bag. And so we brought in some sculptors. We taught them how to sculpt instead. And so they sell their sculptures now. That fish there goes for 5,000 pesos, which is about $100. And just took her a couple of days to sculpt that. And so, you know, instead of just thinking of the poor as being worthless or useless, when you start to see that they have the same potential. There was one thing that really changed my outlook. I'd only been in the Philippines a few weeks, and I was at a restaurant having a pizza. And outside the restaurant, there were a group of about 5 homeless teenagers, clearly homeless, very dirty, no shoes or anything, just lying on the ground, watching me eat. And so I was eating this pizza, and eventually I couldn't take it anymore, and I said to my friend, come on, I want to go outside. And so we paid the bill, we went outside, and I asked them, are you hungry? And they jumped up off the ground, yes. we're hungry. So I said, okay, we'll take you for something to eat. Where do you want to go? And they had this discussion among themselves, and they decided Jollibee was the best food they could imagine. That's the Filipino version of McDonald's. So we said, okay, let's go. And we took them. There was one about 100 meters away. And it's very difficult for the poor to get inside because there are always guards on the door to protect the hamburgers from the hungry people. So anyway, 20 pesos later we got them past the guard. Not usually in favor of corruption, but we got them inside and we brought them their meal each. And they started to eat the food. And when they'd eaten about half of it, they started to wrap up what was left. They thought, this is strange. Maybe they're full. Maybe they don't eat very often and they have small stomachs. Maybe they're full. And I asked one girl, are you full? And she said, no, I'm still hungry, but I have a mother at home and 3 siblings. And they won't eat anything today unless I share this with them. And I was so moved that even though she was still hungry, she was thinking of her family. And then I noticed one of the other girls was starting to cry. I asked her, why are you crying? And she said, I've lived on these streets all my life, and nobody's ever bought me a meal. And I don't understand. Why are you being kind to us today? And it turned out she thought I wanted to rape her, because that was the only reason she could think of why somebody would buy her a meal. And as I looked at her and I saw the tears coming down her cheek, it suddenly hit me, that could have been me. If I'd been born to a poor family in the Philippines instead of a poor family in England, then I would have still been there on the streets. And that was a life-changing moment for me. But then it went from I want to help to I need to help. I got everything and I was blessed. And I can honestly say I have never been happier than the last 15 years of my life. And that's something it's hard to explain to people. You only understand it by doing it, right? Those of you who volunteer. Actually, the very first time in my life I volunteered, I was 15 years old. I didn't care about the cause. The reason I was going was there was a pretty girl there that I was volunteering. And I think I only went twice because then she stopped going. So, but I think if we can involve our kids little ways, that's one of the things that inspired me earlier, just seeing the school kids doing things and to raise them with that culture. That's a joy you cannot get through stuff. And in England, I was raised with the dream, a big dream for myself. My own career, my own cars, biggest house, and so on. It's all about me. But in the Philippines, I learned that life is not about me. It's really about we, our community. And it's beautiful to see that happening here in Singapore. And so you have this reputation as a very prosperous, very successful nation. And sometimes people look at you when you are that way and think you must be selfish. And that's how probably a lot of people think about me when I'm being introduced, when they talk about Ferraris and helicopters and things. But I think Singapore can also really do a lot for the countries around you, and for your kids to go to countries like the Philippines and actually be involved in building something can be life-changing for them as well. So a few years ago, we realized GK had to change. Just building houses was not enough, and schools and so on, but for people to not be poor, they have to work. But no matter how hard you work in the Philippines, you're still going to be poor because minimum wage there is very, very low. And so my wife wanted to start a social enterprise selling natural and organic products, face care, lipstick, hair care, and all of those things. And she was trying to convince me to get involved. And I was saying, no, that's for you. If you want to make an organic car, I'm in. But lipstick, don't know anything about that. But she was convincing me, she kept on pressuring me. And eventually one day I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll pray about it. And I thought, there's no way God wants me to leave working with the poorest of the poor to make lipstick. But to my horror, when I started to pray, and this is how I make big decisions in my life. I always pray, and I really try and open my heart to what God wants to show me, because it's usually something different to what I can see myself. And to my horror, when I started to pray, I started to get this conviction that I should be involved. And so, I had to leave what I was doing in GK, most of it anyway, in order to get involved. And I still don't know anything about lipstick. but it's been 9 years now, and I can see how social enterprise can also really help to transform society. And so we started this company. It's based on these 3 values: pro-Philippines because it's our home, pro-poor, we exist purely to try and get people out of poverty, and pro-environment, just to try and make things which are not harmful to the environment. It's been 9 years now. We have about 500 something employees. We have 35 branches in the Philippines. And I didn't tell you earlier, actually in the space of about 7 years, I actually gave away all my money to GK. It started just as giving bits here and there, a few villages, and it became like, you know, a brainwashing thing. In fact, my family thought I was being brainwashed. They sent my mother to the Philippines to spy on me for 2 weeks. And then she went back to England and she told my sister, "No, this is great. They're really helping a lot of people." And my sister said, "They brainwashed you as well." And so this is my little, you know, that joy of giving. I started to give it all away. All we had left went into this company. Every last penny. And in fact, I had to borrow money from my mother-in-law for a few months just to keep us going. And so, you know, that's not an easy decision to make, but I've never looked back from it. And so this company now, it's a social enterprise. We're still building villages. The profits, most of them, go into building villages. This is one of our farming communities. They grow sunflower and passion fruit that we use in our products. And then the profits go back to that community to build their homes. This is another one that was hit by a major typhoon a few years ago. We were able to build 100 houses for them. But I just wanted to share with you some of the policies that we have, because this is not just relevant to the Philippines. This is relevant to anyone who's in business, or actually anyone who is a manager who's in charge of people. So we built it on this faith in God and in the poor themselves. So first of all, we pay the living wage. We don't care what the minimum wage is. We give people what we need. And we have something that no business person I've ever talked to thinks is a good idea. We have a no firing policy. Can you imagine that? This is not an easy policy to live with. As soon as I publicly stated this, I regretted it. But we've had it now for the last 8 years. And there have been people that have even stolen from us, but they're still in our company. Why do we keep them? You know, quite simply, if God does not give up on me with all the mistakes I made, I don't want to give up on the people He sent. And it's too easy for a bad leader to blame their followers when things are going wrong. If someone's really doing a bad job, maybe it's my fault. Maybe they're not trained, that's my fault. Maybe they're no longer inspired and motivated, that's still my fault. Or maybe they're just hired for totally the wrong job, it's still my fault, so I should fire myself. And when you deal with the poor, people who their whole lives have been told that they're nothing, they're worthless, they're useless, they believe that. And when you say to them, I know you're going to make mistakes, but we're not going to give up on you. No matter what mistakes you make, your family will be safe. That is life-changing to them. And everybody wants to do well. Everybody wants to feel part of something good. Everyone wants to feel they contribute. Nobody wants to be a parasite. And so, the last 8 years, I've had maybe about 4 people or 5 people that have taken advantage of that policy and tried to do no work. But I have hundreds and hundreds that were transformed because of that policy. And most of our employees are from the bottom of the pyramid. These are the people who didn't even finish high school, not even elementary school, many of them. And yet we've been able to turn them into supervisors, into managers, into good, excellent workers themselves. It was not easy. You know, the people that stole, there was one man, he's in his 50s. I sat down with him. It took me about a week before I could face him after I found out, because he was a very trusted person. And after about a week, I thought, okay, I can talk to him now. And I sat him down and I said, I believe you're a good dad. I don't know why you did this, but I'm not going to give up on you. And I know you're going to recover. And he started to cry, and he told me weeks later, he said that was the worst thing I could have said, because all his life he had been stealing. Every time he would get caught, he would just be fired and he would move somewhere else. His whole life, that was his pattern. And he said when that happened, he went home, he looked himself in the mirror, and he could not even look at himself. And his pattern had been, I get caught, I get punished, I start again. And that changed him. And he's still with us. That happened 5 or 6 years ago. And so it's too easy to give up on people. If you want to be a change maker and you want a country for good, you can't give up on the bad people. You know, there are some. And we've got to figure out how to bring out the good. In fact, my father-in-law always says, you know, some people are 99% bad, 1% good, and you've got to engage the 1% and look to make it 10%, look to make it 20% in that person. And so we deal with a lot of corrupt politicians in the Philippines. When we started to work with them, a lot of people were worried. They thought our volunteers would get corrupted. But I know I haven't seen a single volunteer get corrupted, but I know a lot of corrupt politicians who have started to put in place honest programs because we partnered with them. And so, no firing, but no babying. If you're late for work, you get sent to the farm and you have to start at 4 a.m. And so, I'm not kidding. So people don't come in for work very often. You know, no work on Sundays. These days, the world is moving faster and faster. So many people are under pressure to work 7 days a week, even if it's just checking their email at home. And I feel this is very destructive. Yes, we get richer, but it's not a richer life. It's not a richer lifestyle. And so we have a 7-hour work day in our company, and no work on Sundays. That's bad for us. We cannot put our stores in the malls because we have to open on Sunday to be in the mall. So we could actually be 2 or 3 times the size that we are today if we would get rid of that one policy. But I will not work on Sunday, so I will not require my people to do it either. And yet we're still surviving. Freedom from debt. A lot of the poor, they come in and they have debts. A few years ago, I found out that there was a group of money lenders that were waiting outside our factory gates. And they were waiting for our new employees. And so they would come to the new employees and say, hey, you've got a great job. You're earning a lot of money. Why don't you get your mom a new TV? Why don't you buy a new refrigerator? Things like that. And these new people, they couldn't resist. They said yes. And so the way it works in the Philippines is when you borrow money from a money lender, they get your ATM card and they decide how much of your salary you're going to get at the end of the week. So the way I found out was we had this cleaner with 6 children, and she was earning a lot with us, almost triple the minimum wage. And one day I found out that she was trying to borrow money from her colleague just to buy rice. And it turned out she'd lent her money, she'd borrowed some money to buy something, and the money lender, she was earning 900 pesos a day. The money lender was giving her 600 pesos a week, which is about $12 US a week to live on, and she had 6 kids. And so she was in this vicious hole where every week she had to borrow more from him, and she could never get out. And I found out 30 of our people were in the same situation. So we invited all the money lenders to our office, and I sat them down, and I said, thank you for trying to help our people. We know you're just trying to make their lives better, but they cannot manage their finances. And so we've cancelled all their ATM cards, and I've got an offer to make for you. I will give you today in cash every penny that they borrowed, but 0 of the interest. And I said, here's the option. You can take the principal today, you let go of the interest, or you can keep going to their house every day, because I'm going to pay them in cash every day from now on, and you can try to collect that way. So all the money lenders took the deal. We paid them in cash with 0 interest, and then word went around, don't lend to those human nature people anymore, you'll never earn money from them. And so we realized that there are so many, systems out there trying to keep the poor poor. And if you want to solve poverty, or you want to really help your people, you've got to care enough to get involved in their lives. And don't be afraid to love your people. Many people think business is about survival. And I know a lot of business owners, friends of mine, one even said to me, I wish I could do what you're doing, and I just can't do it. He said, I'll go bankrupt. And I said, no, just start with your top 10 people. Start with your best people. Make small changes. And I promise you, you will not go bankrupt. But he was afraid. People think they will be bad business people if they start to genuinely care about their people. But it's not true. God is always faithful. That's what I found in my life. And so we have all of these other things as well. We started giving wedding benefits because we found out many of them wanted to get married, but couldn't afford it, so we give them 1 month's salary basically to get married. We give them child benefit for every child they have. This year we have scholarship funds and home assistance funds and things like that, because the poor will never catch up unless we really drag them up into the middle class. And a lot of them now, they're building second stories on their homes, they're buying motorbikes, even cars, they're going to Boracay. How many of you know where Boracay is? Okay, so the first time I came to the Philippines, I was going to Boracay, and the taxi driver, I asked him on the way to the airport, I said, have you ever been to Boracay? And he laughed at me. He said, that place is only for the rich. People like me can never go there. So I went there for 3 days of guilt. And I found out last year, his daughter was employed by my company, I didn't even know, and she'd gone to Boracay with her friends, paid for with her own money from her salary from my company. And when I found out, I almost cried, because it just seemed like it had gone full circle. And so it's really beautiful to see these stories. And so yes, you know, you see the smiles on the faces of those people, and everything is really worth it. And so I just want to end sharing with you, leveraging, talking about leveraging. So our company now is doing great, but that's not good enough for us. It will take hundreds of companies like ours for things to start to change. So we've become a gateway for all of these other little social enterprises, and because we have relationships with the supermarkets now in the Philippines, we're now actually the #1 brand of natural personal care in the Philippines. So we have relationships with most of the big supermarkets, and we've managed to get all of these little social enterprises in too, for free. So this one here, this is a sister company of Cold Storage. Cold Storage is here in Singapore, right? Yeah, so this is a sister company that stands in the Philippines, and they're now these are social enterprises, they could never get there on their own. It's only because we gave them a helping hand. We got them through the door, all listing fees waived, all other fees waived, just because they're helping bring the poor out of poverty. And so when you find yourself in that position where you're a little higher up, yes, you have to think about how do you bring them along too? How do you bring the others too? So last year, every year we have this guiding verse for our company. I just wanted to share last year's with you. This was for us. Do not conform to the pattern of the world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And so we made our theme last year, transform from stressed to blessed. How many business people are stressed? All of them, right? But I can honestly say, standing in front of you today, I don't really feel that way anymore. And I really thank God for taking me to the Philippines. And I really just want to encourage you to get involved in the lives of your people. Don't be afraid to love them, but allow the good to come through what you're doing, and you will see the best coming out of them. How do you get the best out of your people? It's very simple. You give the best of yourself. And that's what inspires them to give the best of themselves too, and to really care what they're doing. So final quote, this is what I learned from GK in the Philippines. Less for self, more for others, enough for all. Thank you very much.
Coming down, and I can actually not just feel it, but I can see the transformation in their lives and all the fantastic things that you're doing. Let me ask you, I mean, to your point, I think it's about not just about doing good, but the impact and the transformation that we talk about, right? By the way, you can get ready with your questions and stuff. Oh my goodness, the questions have come in. Sorry guys, because I'm holding the mic, I get the first question. No one can do good alone. So what have been some of the biggest challenges for you in bringing in people to collaborate and, if you like, multiply and do the fabulous work that you and your family have been doing?
Well, what I learned very quickly from GK was that you have to show before and after. You have to show the bad news, but then the good news. And as soon as people see the good news, they see the transformation, and especially if they meet those people, it's very easy. And one thing the thing that really changed me, of course, was when the founder of that organization invited me to go and do something myself. And if he hadn't said that, then I wouldn't have changed as a person, and I would have just ended at one check. So I think it's very important that you have to show people the good news. A lot of charities these days and organizations, we focus on the bad news, and then we try to guilt people into doing something, but we have to show the good news and really inspire people with that too.
Okay, perfect. Now, what I'm going to do is, you've got Slido, some of you got Slido, and also, please, I will also do the old-fashioned way, which is raise your hands. Let me just go to the first question on Slido. Why do you think we celebrate people who give up their wealth? But should we do that as a society? And I'm going to take the next one too. You've had close interaction with social enterprises and charities. Which do you think is more impactful in helping beneficiaries?
Okay, first question, very good question. Actually, I think we celebrate people who gave up their wealth too much. The people that transformed me were not the wealthy people. These were the ordinary people on the ground, volunteers who were sacrificing their evenings, their weekends to go into the slums and change the lives of people they didn't even know as their way of loving their country and putting their faith into action. And that's what changed me, because I couldn't go back home and live the same way anymore. These people, were 10 feet tall in my eyes, because they were, many of them, not much better off than the people they were helping. And that made me look at myself and realize I had to change. And so actually it's more of their stories that I personally find more inspirational. And usually when I get the opportunity, I bring some of them along so that they can also share, because those tend to be the people that can enable others to make life-changing decisions.
Anyone from the audience? Just raise your hand, say where you're from, and just shoot the question. If not, I'm going to go to the next slide of question that's come in.
There was a second one there.
Yes,
didn't get to yet.
Okay, you've had close interaction with social enterprises and charities. So what's more impactful in helping beneficiaries?
Both are very important. When people are really at the bottom, they need intervention. You need charities there to do the relief, or to do the feeding, or to, many different types of needs can only be covered by charity. But when I'm thinking about the poor in particular now, once you get them to a little higher, once you restore their dignity, then they need a way to support themselves. And social enterprises have to be the way forward. You look at capitalism. Capitalism has created a lot of wealth for a small number of people, and we were just talking earlier that 84%, I think now, of the world's resources are in the hands of 1%. And I bet you anything that 1% are not very happy. I bet there are many in the lower 99% who are happier than that top 1%. That's certainly what I found. And we, it's that difference between pleasure and happiness. You get happiness from giving and from seeing people's lives transform. So, capitalism has helped the world progress, but I really feel like social enterprise will be the next stage, because we're starting to see, and people like all of you guys and all of your kids and your families who now have the power. England, where I come from, used to be worse than the Philippines. England was a nation of slums. The government was extremely corrupt. It had a huge empire, but only the aristocracy benefited. My ancestors were living in slums, factory workers. And so what changed England was not the government, but it was actually business people. If you study the history of the UK, in the mid-1800s, all of these industrialists started to transform their businesses. They started building houses and schools for their factory workers. And including the town I grew up in, called Saltaire, in the north of England, the whole town was built by one man, the biggest factory owner at that time in the mid-1800s. And so I think of those guys as social entrepreneurs. Yes, they had businesses, but they eventually put their wealth into building the towns where they were based. And that's what gave them meaning in here.
We have a question from the audience. Go ahead.
My name is Xiaoshen, and I run a social enterprise called The Hidden Good. We tell stories and make the good in the world less hidden. I'm just curious, I think, I've always followed and loved the work that Gawa Kalinga and Human Nature has been doing over the last number of years. And I'm curious, you mentioned a bit about, Singapore being involved, right, and helping the region. And I think I'm curious to find out, more about how you might think those partnerships might happen, because I do think that collaboration and partnerships is the way forward. So yeah, just to hear your thoughts and insights on that, and also the future of human nature. Thank you.
Ooh, great question. Thank you so much. Well, the first thing is just come. Just come, and there are many ways to get involved when you come, and probably the simplest, or one of the simplest, is come for a building trip. We'll bring a group of you. We have this incredible place called the GK Enchanted Farm, just north of Manila, about an hour north, and we tend to bring a lot of foreign visitors there. So you can actually see, it's a hub for social enterprise. We have lots of little ones bubbling away there. And then we would try to get you for 2 or 3 days actually helping to build somewhere as well, the physical work. And it's not as bad as it sounds. But so far, we've actually had students from NUS and a couple of others, me and Polytechnic, I think, Centre Group. And so, so far, everyone that's come generally, loves it. And once you come, you see, the ideas come from you. We wouldn't want to tell you exactly what you should do, but best to just come along. When Tony Nalotto asked me to come back, he didn't even know what to do with me when I arrived there. I proved to be pretty lousy at actually building a house, so he just turned me into a big mouth and stuck me on the stage, and I would go around and try and convince other partners to get involved. Once you come and see it, the ideas will start to flow. But please come.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question from Slido, you can see right up there, what is the balance between social and enterprise? Not firing people who are staying with the company is nice, but how realistic is it? I'm going to squeeze in the second question because I've just been given the 5-minute slide. How do you know that you've really understood the community, the local community's problem as they see it, rather than what you think is the problem?
Okay, great questions as well. So for the first one, yes, and this is the skepticism that I get from a lot of business owners, that it will never work, the no firing policy. But all I can share with you is my experience. And in my experience, God always sends enough of the good people to enable you not to give up on the people you want to fire. And it can take, what I find is there are always 2 outcomes. Either the people leave, the ones that are taking advantage of that policy, or they change. So far, in 8 years of that policy, I've never had one person that carried on for more than a few months the same way. They either change or they leave. And the people that really messed up badly, the 3 or 4 that stole, all now doing well, but we don't trust them with money anymore. It doesn't mean they do the same job. You find something else that they can do instead. The important thing is not to give up on them. So all I can share is my personal experience. 500 employees, and it's worked for us for 8 years. So the other question was, how do you know you've understood the local community's problem as they see it, rather than what you think is a problem? And that's a very good question as well. Of course, you have to engage the community first. You can't just go in with what you think is the answer. And we have had that. I won't pretend we haven't. We've got 3,000 communities that we work with, and there are a handful of those communities that were not happy with the work that we did. And we came in with a program that they, in the end, didn't like. But again, almost all of them, because we listen, we take on board their input. Some of them start with housing, others start with farming, others start with a preschool, others start with feeding. You can't just have one answer if you really want to help. You've got to be willing to listen, of course.
Thank you. And actually what struck me with what you've shared is also something that Melissa said this morning, and what I heard also at the session. It's something that you have to experience. It's something very personal, right? In Melissa's case, you had to relearn and unlearn and then learn. And that, for you, was something you had to experience that transformed your lives. So, and Marianne also talked about that when she said you actually have to take ownership. You have to take accountability of things that matter. And that's what the Giving Forum is about. So I think it leaves me to thank Dylan for a very, very, very fun afternoon, and really inspiring and getting us to think about some of the things that you've talked about and to get us moving. And this is what the forum is about, right? So do what, and I'm going to steal from, is Ken Ping still here? But I'm going to steal from Ken Ping. Do what you believe in, is what he said, and do it with your heart. So on that note, thank you all. Thank you, Dylan, for coming in.